Hello and welcome to MIP TV. And in this section, which is TA Made Simple, Bob Cook, a transactional analyst, shares with us simple concepts of TA and teaches them in a way that everybody can understand. And today, we're looking at the OK Corrall. So it's not cowboy hats and six guns, this, is it, Bob?
No, it isn't. It sounds like it, though.
It does, doesn't it? So, bang, bang, bang. What is the OK Corrall then, Bob?
So we have to go back to Eric Berne, who was the originator of transactional analysis psychotherapy in 1961. And he came up with the idea of what he called existential life positions. So what that means really is that, let's put it in context, TA, or transactional analysis, is a developmental model. In other words, the past affects the present. What we decide in the past has its consequences in the present. That's what I mean by a developmental model. And he created, as we know, the PAT model, parent, adult, child, to explain all those phenomena I've been teaching for the last goodness knows how many years. But he also came up with the idea that by the first few years of life, and Freud did as well, by the way, so there's nothing different here, that as children and young infants, we make basic decisions about ourselves, which form a template for the rest of our lives at a basic level. And he came up with what he called 4 existential life positions that we adopt early in childhood. Yeah, very, very basic. And that we will visit these life positions throughout life, and that we actually have a favorite corner that we might stay in more. So these life positions, and they became actually the name of them anyway, the backdrop to a very famous TA book. But anyway, these life positions are, which I'll start off with the most healthy position. I'm okay as a person, and you're okay. So the most healthy position. So an infant child growing up at a very basic level makes a decision in terms of the rearing of the significant others that I'm okay and you're okay. So that's the most healthy position on the quadrant, if you like. Then there's another life position, which is I'm okay, you're not okay, which is more of the paranoid position. More of the explosion position, if you like. The external position is I'm okay, you're not okay. And it's an extreme, at its extreme would be, of course, homicide. Killing or hurting or harming others as an extreme, because I'm okay, you're not okay. Then we have the position which is I am not okay, you are okay. Which again, at its extreme, is self-harm, suicide, it's withdrawing, imploding, that position. And then the most futile position of all of them, these 4 positions, is that I'm not okay, you're not okay. So that is the most unhealthy, and its extremes, of course, is homicide and suicide. Both ends of the quadrant. So that Berne came up with these 4 positions that he would argue people existentially choose from, if you like, at a very early age. We may visit them throughout the duration of life, but we have a favorite corner. So you might have come from quite a paranoid place. Am I okay, you're not okay. Trust, mistrust being the major issues, jealousy, all those things. Or you might have a schizoid position of withdrawal, which is, I'm not okay, you are okay, and then the healthy position, the more futile position. And those are the 4 positions he talked about, Eric Berne, early in his life.
It's really interesting because when I teach this, I teach this as a very simple model of attachment. So I would say that someone is I'm okay, you're okay, which is a secure attachment. I'm okay, you're not okay, which is an avoidant dismissive attachment. I'm not okay, you're okay, but ambivalent attachment. And of course, I'm not okay, you're not okay, as a reactive or disorganized attachment position. And as you say, their early decisions in life. Did Byrne make a connection between? Is it a form of attachment life view, or didn't Byrne kind of frame it in that way?
No, and he didn't elaborate it. If you think about it, he came up with this in 1961, which is what, 70 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he didn't cover the pun, if you like. He didn't attach it to attachment theory. Attachment hadn't really come around so much then.
Yeah.
I mean, the focus of it now, it rolls off the tongue. And there's many theorists have actually written such wonderful books. And of course, Bowlby himself, who took, the whole, so it wasn't quite around attachment, but those 4 positions of attachment, if you want to look at it that way, was later than Byrne. So attachment theory hadn't really come to the forefront then. Bowlby hadn't written all the stuff. I mean, Winnicott in his late 50s, I'm sure Byrne knew about, and Winnicott's idea of the secure base.
Yeah.
And that was around, but Byrne talked about it more as a way. I think the frame he put on it was that as the child reacts to all the transactions around him, that they formulate these basic positions of life about themselves and other people, and that becomes a hub of the early life plan, which then becomes a script, which then becomes played out later in life.
Yeah, it's the more I hear about this, I mean, you think of disorganized attachment. That only really came into being in the 1980s, long after Ainsworth had done the strange situation experiments, and Bowlby had talked about the biological nature of attachment. But yeah, I think it's really interesting because it does sound like an attachment position in everything but name.
Correct, but I'll say it again. Byrne attached it to script theory.
Yes,
that's the frame Byrne came from.
Yes,
it was the hub of the formation of the early script of the child.
Yeah, and that's where that'll certainly be different to Bowlby, because Bowlby's view was very biological, not kind of behavioural. So there'd be a big difference there. Although Ainsworth kind of moved it on a bit, but it is interesting. So how would a TA therapist work using this theory of life positions?
Yeah, I'll answer that, but I just want to go back to the OK Corrall.
Yes, of course, yes.
Which came later, and this was sort of like a diagram of OK Corrall. And a TA therapist called Ernst, and I think it was 1972, came up with this idea of a quadrant, if you like, which he called OK Corrall, where you could put these life positions on them and be able to point to these different life positions and talk about how a person would visit these different life positions throughout life, but had a favourite corner. So that's where the terminology OK Corrall comes from in the 70s, but it comes from Byrne's work. Now, let's answer your question clinically, how a TA therapist. Okay. So a TA therapist is somebody who thinks of ego states, TA proper, games, and script, like I've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
So if we take these life positions as the hub of a script, like I've just said, and a script is formed early in childhood, which becomes the way of being in the world, if you like, and you carry these hopeless scripts or helpless scripts through. And the job of a TA therapist is help a client look at where their unhealthy patterns comes from in terms of script theory, if you like. So if you think of these OK Corrall positions as the hub of the script, then it would be very useful for a TA therapist to do inquiry, script inquiry, if you like, through questions to look at how a person thinks about themselves and other people. Like, I'm not okay, you're okay, and the types of people they will meet and the people they will attract in terms of script theory, and help a person may become aware of that and then put a new script on the road. But the first step is helping the person understand the beginnings of those scripts, which is the 4 basic life positions.
Yes.
Help them explain how that doesn't help them today and the people they meet and the scripts they come from. And though we can't change people's histories, we can change their response. People can change their responses to the histories. So understanding the connections between life positions and scripts helps the person understand how they have become the way they are today.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it was a best-selling book, wasn't it, when it came out?
I'm okay, you're okay, yeah.
I'm okay, and then you know, it was hugely popular in America, as the games people, as the Burns book, The Games People Play, as a very early, I guess, personal development book. But it's really interesting. I'm fascinated about how very close it is to attachment, and how Byrne saw it as early life decisions. It's a kind of, I don't know. It seems like attachment theory, just discussed in a different way and contextualized in a different way.
Well, it's interesting because the famous, very famous British psychoanalyst in the 40s, Melanie Klein.
Ah, yes.
You heard of her? She talked about life positions.
Mm.
And again, she talked about it in terms of the early way that a child starts to formulate themselves in response to the world.
Mm.
And she also talked about it in terms of these life positions, especially the unhealthy ones, could lead to, in her framework, this is Melanie Klein talking,
yes,
the depressive position, and quite sort of really dark pathology, if you like. So Eric Byrne, I think, who was a psychoanalyst in his earlier days, will have known about Melanie Klein. Probably took some of those ideas and linked them to script and a more positive way of thinking about life than some of the darker ideas of Melanie Klein.
Yeah, and of course, one of Byrne's kind of goals in this at the time, this new therapeutic endeavor was to make it a very accessible theory. So anybody who's read any Melanie Klein, you know, I've read a bit of Melanie Klein, and it is very, very complex and if I'm really honest, totally impenetrable, I think, or very difficult.
Well, the best position for Melanie Klein for the child, and this about sums it up, is the depressive position.
Right.
So that's the best you can get.
Okay. Right. Well, yeah. So there's really no good news in Klein's work.
But I think that's where he got the ideas, and he links it to script. And I really understand what you're saying in the connection with attachment theory. But attachment theory came later, I think.
Yeah.
You know, whole writings and Bowlby and everything else all came later than Byrne.
Yeah. It really is interesting, and it just goes to prove there's nothing new under the sun in the world of human psychology. It's the same song, just sung to a different tune.
In many ways, that's true. I mean, one of my heroes, Carl Rogers, and I'm sure one of your heroes as well.
Indeed.
The Humanistic Revolution, 1950s. I mean, many of those ideas are they're put forward in many different guises for the next 70 years. But we can go back to Marino in 1932 and look at his actionistic approaches and play therapy and drama therapy, and look where we are today. We can look at the ideas of Byrne around stimulus hunger and recognition hunger, and we could look at that in terms of relationship hunger. So many of the different components from many ways of therapeutic thinking span the arc of time.
You do, and in fact, you know, there is a name for it, which of course is common factors, which was coined in the 1800s by Saul Rosenweg.
So we're going right back now, but you're
going right back, you know. But I think if there's any students of counselling and psychotherapy, I think what we're describing here is to have an appreciation across the modalities. You may be looking at one modality, but to appreciate others. I sometimes worry when people say my therapy is better than your therapy, and that type of thing. It doesn't happen often. When it does, it can be a little bit.
Great.
Yeah, it grates a bit. So the OK Corrall. Well, I'm glad we didn't have any cowboy boots or Stetsons, and I'm certainly glad I didn't have to ride a horse because I'm terrible on anything that has 4 legs. So, as Bob Cook, thank you as always for sharing this, and I'm sure people will find it really useful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.